Well, hello to you everyone. I feel like it has been a hot minute since I have sat down and filmed. Busy times, but today is Monday. I have the day off. It's Easter Monday. And Nora is at daycare. I am home alone while Barry is getting the tires changed. I have Winnie at my feet and I'm ready, like itching to film. And so here we are. Today we're going to chat about everything that I read in March. Read some pretty darn good books in March. I read 10 books in total. And of course, as per usual, we're going to start with The Vial. These are books that either drove me a little crazy or I just could not get on with. That said, if you liked these books, this is nothing against you at all. Nothing really against these books even, or the writer, or anything like that. It's just my personal opinion. I struggled with these ones. First up, we have a book that I barely remember. All the Dangerous Things by Stacey Willingham. This was my first Stacey Willingham, and I picked it from the Book of the Month Club. And I just found it frustrating. So this book, I will tell you, is about a woman, a mother, whose child, I think he was 2 years old when he was taken from his crib in their home and vanished without a trace. He was kidnapped. We are a year later or something along those lines, and she's still, of course, obsessed with finding her son, as you would be. She can't sleep. That is one of the side effects of what has happened to her, is she literally is barely clinging on to life, because I think at a certain point of you not sleeping, you can actually die. So she'll find herself like falling asleep in random places and then waking up very suddenly. She since has, left her husband, or her husband, I should say, has left her. The marriage has demolished. And she started working with a true crime podcaster who is looking into this case. The police are still trying to figure out what happened, and many people believe that she had something to do with it, even though she's like, I absolutely did not. However, there is stuff from her history and her childhood that she doesn't want known by anyone, including this true crime podcaster. And of course, that is unraveled, and we follow along as the unraveling unfolds. I feel like I liked the premise of this more than the execution. Of course, I was, rooting for this kid to be found. Although after such a long time, you kind of assume that they have met a terrible end. I guess I don't remember it very well anymore. I read this at the very, very start of March, and now it's like mid-April. And that's a bad sign when I don't remember why I disliked it, but I know that I disliked it. So moving on, I guess I'll be passing that one along to the charity shops. Next is going to be a book that, again, is a Vial book for me, that I think a lot of people are going to very much disagree with. And that is, I'm Glad My Mom Died. This is everywhere, and has been everywhere for months now. This follows, I believe, Jeanette McCurdy. She is an actor, or she was an actor, I should say, a child actor. And this is her biography, her autobiography about what happened to her as a child. Are you okay, Winnie? What did you do to yourself? Are you okay? What did you do to yourself? Literally just sitting here, and what happened? You're okay? You're okay. All right, you got your bone. Things are going to be fine. So Jeanette McCurdy grew up acting, but as we find out in this book, it was very reluctant. Her mother wanted her to act, and she had no real interest in acting, but she did have a real interest in making her mom proud and making her mom happy. Her mom was very all over the place with her attitude. Like, she would go through extreme highs to extreme lows. I don't know what mental illness she had. She must have had some sort of mental illness that would cause her to do these things. But Jeanette McCurdy lived through a very kind of tumultuous childhood where she felt like she was constantly trying to make her mom happy, and so lived her life for her mom. And she continued doing that into her teen years, and I think into her like early adulthood, essentially. I found this story to be badly written, and I feel like most people would think the opposite. It was chopped up into very bite-sized chapters, to the point that it felt almost like diary entries. Yes, they flowed in terms of timeline, but that was it to me. It was just these tiny bite-sized chapters about her mom and how her mom treated her. There's very little about the rest of her family, which I think was a huge missing point. Like her brothers were not spoken about enough in here in my mind. Her father was not spoken enough in here in my mind. Maybe that was because it is an autobiography. Her mom had died by the time she's writing this story, but I'm assuming the rest of her family is still alive and well. But I think for the reader, we kind of needed a little bit more about that. I also found the title to be strange. Yes, the title jumps out, absolutely. And would make you pick it up. Like the cover is her like holding an urn. So it's a great title, and yet the bulk of the book is talking about her being quite obsessed with trying to make her mom happy. Now, this is because of like obvious childhood abuse in some kind of way, because she was, only equated getting love from having to do everything that her mom wanted her to do. And that is not the way to parent in any way, shape, or form. I am not saying that she had a good childhood or she had any choice in what she was doing. She really did not at all. So I absolutely sympathize with her that way. But I feel like the title did not go with the book, because the whole book is talking about her trying desperately to make her mom happy. So that was a bit disjointed for me. Like, I wish that there had been a portion at the end, at least, where she spoke to truly understanding, like going through all of the therapy and truly understanding how terrible her childhood was, and the abuse, and realizing that it was her mom and not her, all of that. I will say also this speaks to an eating disorder. She was bulimic, maybe anorexic as well at portions of her life. So trigger warnings for that all over the place. That as well was encouraged by her mom. Also completely just madness. I cannot imagine wanting to do any of the things that her mom did to my own child. So all that to say, interesting life that she lived. I'm not, dismissing that at all. I just think that it could have been written better. Now we move on to the tolerable books. These are books that I liked, I enjoyed, I was not blown away with. They do not need to be on my shelves. They were okay. So, number 1 here is Dark Roads by Chevy Stevens. This is my first Chevy Stevens book. It will not be my last. I did very much enjoy this. This is a Canadian author, and this story tells a very important Canadian story that has been going on. We have out in BC a place called the Highway of Tears, and it's called the Highway of Tears because so many women have gone missing, have died in this little area. Many, many, many of which are Indigenous women. We have an enormous, horrific problem in Canada where Indigenous women are murdered, and not a lot happens after that. Not a lot of investigation happens. Currently, there are women, horrifically, they were dumped in a landfill, and the police are not searching the landfill for various reasons that I won't go into. In some ways, I think they're trying, but I don't think they're trying hard enough. And Indigenous people are currently feeling, and rightly so, that they and their bodies can be tossed aside like trash and no one will care. And it is so disturbing. I'm getting mad. I'm getting mad, but this story is about part of that issue. And it was very interesting. I was so happy that this was being spoken about. Yes, in fiction, but still, you know, you can learn a little bit about history and about current affairs through fiction. You can obviously do your own research. The reason that this is just in the tolerable section is because I did find the characters to be quite flat. They were one-dimensional characters. There was also a lot of romance in here, and that annoyed me. I just don't have any time for romance in my books, for the most part. Also, our main character, Haley, felt, you know, like she had 9 lives. In this book, I will say, Haley's father has died, and she has gone to live with like a family friend. And that man is a cop and very abusive, like next level abusive to her, and, you know, throws his power around. Throws his power around? My God, I can't think today. And so she leaves. She leaves this little town that she has always lived in and runs away to a cabin, essentially. And everyone believes that she was killed by the serial killer killing people in the Highway of Tears. And so we follow her, and then we follow a woman who was working to become a lawyer, who leaves that to come to this little town because her sister was killed by a serial killer in the Highway of Tears. And these two stories collide. I love the premise of it. I love the story itself, really. It was just that the characters felt flat, and I did not understand why we needed so much romance. Just for me, it was too much. It was gritty. I have heard that Chevy Stevens is gritty. Really appreciated that. This will not be my last Chevy Stevens. I hope she writes more about the Highway of Tears. I would love to see that. I just think it's an important topic to talk about. That's, you know, because of everything that's still going on. So that was tolerable for me. Another tolerable book, and the only other one, so we're only moving into greater books going forward, but this is I Remember You. This is a ghost story about a group of friends who have bought a little house, kind of like a cabin, on an island, and they're there to spruce it up. There are multiple other houses on this little island that no one lives in. No one else is there except them. For some reason, they think this is a great place to invest our money. They find out very soon that they are wrong because they're dropped off by a man. They're dropped off in a boat. There you go. The guy leaves with the boat, so they are trapped until he comes back. And there's a ghost. And I will say this was truly scary a lot of the time, very eerie. However, you kind of go back and forwards in chapters from differing perspectives. You have the people who are at this cabin thing, trying to spruce it up, also trying to survive because there's a ghosty person there. And then you move over to a doctor who is looking into an apparent suicide, and a suicide of a woman who was very much obsessed with his son. And his son went missing several years ago now. She was obsessed with him, and then she killed herself. So he's obviously looking into that. And these storylines absolutely do converge at some point. But what I found was I would be fully invested in these scary moments between these friends who are being haunted at this place. And then suddenly I'm taken out of it and into this other storyline. And I know why the other storyline is important, but I found it very frustrating. And every time I was taken out of the eeriness. And so it had to like work its way back into me. So I found that to be frustrating. Moving on to the Splendid. These are books that I really, really enjoy, that I'm so glad that I read. I would happily have them on my shelves. The first is The Cold, Cold Ground by Adrienne McKinty. This is essentially a detective story. It's the first in a series. It's the Sean Duffy series. I'm currently listening to the second one, and I'm really liking them so much. This takes place in 1981 in Northern Ireland, so we have a war going on in Ireland at this time, and we have a Catholic cop who is living in an area where it's mostly Protestants. He feels a little bit, I don't know, like people are looking at him a certain way because he's Catholic. Also, cops at the time were being attacked quite literally when they were, you know, out driving about. They would be shot at. Every time he gets into his car, he looks under his car to see if there are any bombs attached, because this was the life that he was living in, the times that he was living in. So you have this very interesting backdrop, and he is currently looking into a serial killer who is homophobic, killing off gay men, and you've got this juxtaposed with this strange time that he's living in. I thoroughly enjoyed this. I really like Sean Duffy himself. He's quite funny. Like there's often this, like, in detective series, like this brooding man, you know, this brooding detective, and Sean Duffy is not like that. He is hilarious. He is so funny. He's very brave, and he will not let go. He's like a dog with a bone when it comes to his cases, which makes him a very, very good detective. And you follow him trying to solve these murders. And I honestly care less about the murders than I do the situation that he's in Ireland, and just his personal life. Like it's very strange that I'm more invested in that stuff. But I don't really know a ton about Ireland at that time. I know a little bit, of course, but not a ton. And this is a great way to learn. Obviously, it's fiction. I recognize that, but still great to learn history this way. Next up, we've got People Person by Candice Carty-Williams. She wrote Queenie, which was one of my favorite books of, was it 2020? I think it was 2020. I just adored that book, and she's done it again. She's such an incredible writer. This follows a family of half siblings. So we follow primarily Dimple, and these half siblings really don't know each other very well. They have one father in common who was a terrible father, like really was in and out of their lives, knew very little about them as people. But one day he does decide that he's going to get them all together and introduce them. And so he drives around town in his car, picks them all up, and they meet each other. And that kind of sparks this interest in the siblings to get to know one another. And we've got Dimple in a situation that I will not say because I was shocked about the situation she was in. And she decides to call one of her half siblings, and that sibling calls the others, and they all congregate together to try to figure out what they should do for Dimple in a really, really, really bad situation. And they all come together and become like family to her. They are family, but it almost feels like found family. It feels like they're thrown together time and time again in these kind of odd situations. But they're there for each other. And again, it's that thing that she does, that found family kind of thing that she just writes so well about. In Queenie as well, she writes about parenting and like disjointed, not perfect relationships between children and their parents. Again, that's in this book. I really love Candace Carty-Williams and all of her writing. I cared about all of the characters. All of the characters were multi-layered, which I loved. They had multi-layers. You ended up rooting for every single one of them. I just loved it. Highly, highly recommend People Person. Before we get to my favorite book of March, I have one more splendid book to share with you, and that is Mrs. England by Stacey Halls. I finally read it. This has been on my shelves for a hot minute now. It is probably the most beautiful book that I own. Look at this cover and then look at that. Oh, it's so beautiful. In any case, this follows a woman named Rosie, I believe. Ruby, wrong. It takes place in 1904. She is a nurse and she takes care of children, essentially. So she is with a family. They decide that they're going to move to America, ask her to come with them. And she says no, she has obligations at home and doesn't feel like she can leave. You learn much more about those obligations throughout the book. She does take the opportunity to care for a group of children called the England children. And they live in West Yorkshire. And it's this beautiful house, but it's an isolated house. She's used to London, and this is very different for her. She gets there and realizes Mrs. England is quite strange in that she will not interact with her children. She's very hesitant to interact with her husband. She doesn't say much to Ruby. And so throughout this book, you're finding out what is going on with Mrs. England. Like, is something wrong? What is going on? Or is she in a very tense situation? What is happening with Mrs. England? That is what you're finding out in this book. You also feel very stuck in Ruby's position. You are obviously rooting for her, but you feel like, you know, this is not the position that she thought it was going to be in any way, shape, or form. And she feels stuck because she wants to care for these kids who might be in a situation that isn't the best for them. And she also feels stuck because she's already, you know, left a position before, and there's kind of a society or a group that she belongs to in which if you leave a position 3 times or more, or less, I should say, you're kicked out, and then it's harder to find work. And so she doesn't want to leave for that reason as well. So you're finding out the mystery of Mrs. England herself. You're also finding out the mystery of Ruby and her history, which was also super interesting. I really enjoyed this book. I feel like Stacey Halls can do no wrong. I've read all of her books now. She is one of my favorites. Favorite authors. And now we are at my favorite book of March, and that has to be My Brilliant Friend by Elena Ferrante. Now, I will say I read the first and second book in this. The first was my favorite in comparison to the second, but I couldn't tell you about the other one anyway before. So here we are. They kind of go together then. So My Brilliant Friend is an Italian book, and this is translated fiction, and it follows these 2 girls living in Italy, I believe in the late 50s, early 60s. You follow them throughout their entire lives. This is the first in a series. There's 4 in the series. What is that called? I don't know. Trilogy, duology, quartet? We're gonna go with that. And these girls are incredibly intelligent girls and very, very competitive with one another and with everyone, but particularly with one another. That is the thread that that you see throughout the entire book, but the entire series of books, I should say. But they also really love each other. So yes, they are at odds with one another a lot. They love each other. I will say this is a very toxic friendship, and one that I would not be in. I would not want any one of my friends to be in, including my daughter, like absolutely not. But I cannot stop reading these books. I'm listening to them all on audio. I just finished the third one. I'm moving on to the fourth one next. In any case, really enjoying the series. It is a little bit infuriating, I will say, as you're reading. I definitely am infuriated, but at the same time, I am so hooked that it has to be good writing. Anyway, that has been such a joy in March. Those are all of the books that I read in March. Let me know in the comments below, what is your favorite of March? I'd love to know, and I will talk with you very soon. Goodbye.